Loving God, loving life. Here we are in Hebrews chapter 4, where we find the theme of this chapter is that the good news was offered to ancient Israel, just like it has been offered to us, and that through faith we enter into the rest of the Lord. The final theme of this chapter is that though tempted in all points, in every way, Jesus was without sin. Again, I'm always just going to bring one nugget to you out of these chapters. There's so much here because, again, for me especially, this place of rest that is referred to again in chapter 4, it's just been a theme that has just so blessed my life. I have discovered, I really have, that if I will fight my giants, and what honestly keeps me fighting giants, fighting to overcome, is I have learned that God has a blessed life for me. It is a fruitful life, and that's what keeps me overcoming, keeps me fighting those giants. I'm just not going to allow myself to get lazy. Why? Because God has a fruitful life for me. Let's just read to you the very first couple of verses here. God's promise, of entering his rest still stands. Again, he's comparing, saying, God promised them to get into the promised land. He says this rest and this promise of getting his people to a place of rest, a fruitful life, it still stands. He says it still stands. The promise still stands. So, but then listen to this. We ought to tremble with fear that some of you might fail to experience it. For this good news, and what is this good news? That God has prepared this rest, has been announced to us just as it was to them. But it did them no good because they didn't share the faith of those who listened to God. Here he's talking about this place of rest, and he tells them that they should tremble with fear that some of them might fail to experience it. Now, if this place of rest, this fruitful life, that's what the place of rest is that he's referring to. It's the fruitful life that God has for every human being. If every human being will listen to God and follow him, they're going to have to fight some giants, but if they'll end up in a fruitful place. They'll end up loving life, enjoying life. Fruitfulness is just the way God has designed this world. If you keep planting every seed from an original wheat kernel, just in 4 plantings, you're going to have 9 million kernels. God has designed fruitfulness into the planet, just the way things function with God. Okay, God says, I'm going to get you there. But, now catch this, he says, you ought to tremble with fear that you might not end up fruitful. Now, wow, why should I tremble with fear? Well, we ought to tremble with fear because the story was that God was leading them by a cloud at night, a pillar of fire by night and a cloud by day. God was leading them right to this fruitful land. It wasn't hard to find the way. If this were a needle in a haystack, if it was really, really hard to find this fruitful life, it would make sense that, God would just say, hey, the few really, really strong people can find this, but it's really, really hard to find. No, it's just the opposite. God is saying that, gang, just like that pillar of fire and that pillar of cloud, that cloud rather is going to guide you, God is saying, I'm going to guide you to your fruitful life. I'm going to be right in your face. I'm going to bring it right up to your face. If you'll just overcome the stuff that I put in your face, if you'll just say yes, let me say it this way. If you'll do the next right thing every day, just do the next right thing. If you'll do that, because God's going to drive it right up to your door. The reason you should tremble with fear to miss a fruitful life is the only way you miss it. The only way is you start saying no to God. You start rejecting him. Instead of doing the next right thing, you do the next selfish thing. The reason we ought to tremble with fear to miss this is because the only way to miss it is to disregard God. It is. Because he takes responsibility to get us there. He leads us there. He led them there with a cloud and a pillar of fire. He leads us there by driving it right up to our door. These are not random circumstances in our face. They are steps that if we'll trust God and just do the next right thing, they're steps strategically placed that will lead us into a fruitful, blessed life. The number one way fruitfulness manifests itself is we're helping people. We are helping people. We're part of a church that's helping people. We're helping people find Christ. We're helping people get saved. We're helping people find their purpose on planet Earth. We're helping people. It's a massive part of a fruitful life, and God will lead you there one step at a time. Just say yes to him. Friends, let's pray that. God, today, send me one person today to share your love with. Sharing God's love is a massive part of being fruitful. Friends, never forget, loving God is truly the only way to love your life.